This is what you have as a closure. This busk, they all come in different length, depending on what you're going to be using it for and where you're going to be using it. Most of the time, I would say that's where it gets used, in the center front. A lot of times it's just the center front, and sometimes it's center back. Is this center front because you are able to busk it up yourself? It's easier. You have better access to it. In the back, someone has to do it for you.
But we can't do like, we can hide that, hide.
You
that.
could, if you have to use a reverse and flip it, yeah, you could. But for most cases, that part of the busk is exposed. You will see it. That's part of a corset. Any corset that you look at, if they're using busk for it, so busk part is exposed. Unless you want to just create some kind of shield over or overlap over it to cover it, that's what you could do, like what we did with the zippers. But this is mostly exposed. You don't have to use that. This is a very old style way of doing the corsets. They used to do that before. Now zippers obviously is easier and more accessible for everybody. So with this, we start with lining this up to the edge, and we just have to mark where this opening is going to be, because we have to close the seam. You mark it, and then you do the same thing to the other side, but the other side is different because there is only other side. It only needs a pinhole for this to get through. For this side, you need to have a slit open. As you can see on the sample over there, here that's also the same. One side gets this through the seams out, and that's where we mark. I only have 3, this one has 4. So that depends. And the other side, you need to create a hole for the pin to poke through. So that is a little bit different. So let's start with this side. All you have to do is start sewing your 1/2-inch seam. And stop and go. You just have to make sure it's secure. Your stitches, use the reverse to secure it. Again, what's going to happen to the top and bottom of this? It depends on your design and what you're planning to finish this. A lot of time, one edge gets finished from inside, the other edge is going to get finished with the binding for a better access or better finishing edge. A lot of time, both edges going to get finished from inside. As I said, depends different scenarios. We have to deal with it individually. But with this, I'm just going to leave the edge for now. On these ones, I'm going to leave the edge unfinished. Because as I said, I'm going to do one edge finishing on the other sample, so I don't want to do all edge finishing for all of them right now. So we're just gonna put this through. And we're gonna start securing it down. So securing down, that means you need to use the zipper foot to stitch it right against the Busk boning part. So for that, I'm gonna be switching into the zipper foot so it can sew as close as possible. As I said, if you decide to finish this from inside, so you have to do it prior to this stitching. So I'm gonna probably, let's do that practice. I'm just gonna finish this end from inside, so you can see at least one edge finished. The other edge is gonna be a binding finishing. That. Then we're gonna put this in between. Put it upside down. Okay, then make sure it gets pulled out very tight, and you need to stitch it as close as possible to the back. So obviously you need to have extra clear end for edge finishing again. You don't want to stitch over the busk because you know how hard that busk is. It's metal boning. So you need to have a little bit of end kind of clear for your stitch line. So you're either going to get finished with the binding or any other way of the finishing that we decide to do. So that is going to be like that. So for the other side, we could do the same thing, finish one end if it requires. And of course, this edge where the busk is going to go into also needs to be finished with your 1/2 inch seam. So this side is fully closed. You don't have to create any opening for that to go stick out. But the only thing is that then we have to mark the placement for those pins and cut the hole for it. So if I put this here like that, I want to make sure that these are all lining up properly together. I'm just going to mark here, 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 and here, because I know where the boning is going to poke through, or the pins. I just clean those corners a little bit, pull it out. I'm going to grab, I want to kind of make the least amount of damage to the holes. A lot of time happens that you have to punch a hole, start stitching around the hole to create some kind of eyelets. But at this point here, I just want to put this in, create some kind of hole with the awl, least amount of damage to the fabric, and push this through. If I have to punch a hole, obviously I have to have some kind of edge finishing for it. So that means either I'm going to use fray check, something that doesn't fray, the fabric doesn't fray in after, or I have to do some kind of hand stitching around it to create that eyelet type of shape. But in here, I'm just going to punch a hole. And I push it all the way into the thickest part of the awl to get the hole wide open. It still requires force to push it in, but this way at least I know my fabric doesn't get damaged as much. So you will end up with this kind of hole, but this is just pushing the fibers away from the center rather than cutting them. And I will see if you can just push it through. Like that. Thank you. So that should give you that flexibility to push it through.
I have a question. You can open like every fabric like this.
With this?
Yeah, we can use.
Yeah, you could use that. If you're dealing with leather, obviously with leather you use the hole puncher and punch a hole. If it's the leather, because leather doesn't fray. But if you're using the fabric, I rather use this rather than punching the hole, because punching hole obviously is going to cut the fabric away. I rather not to do that. And then again, you're just going to sew it very close to hold it in place. And then this is going to be ready to go. Again, if you're concerned about the look of this and you don't want to see this, you need to create a shield. Create a shield that it goes inside the seam here on top. It goes inside the seam of the top part of the busk, sits in there to cover this. So it's a shield like this that goes inside the seam, and it should be covering but this is going to be a separate piece, right? Unless you're planning to create the overlap for it, you could do that as well. If you want to create the overlap and do the same thing we did with the zipper, with the seam being rolled under, and there is going to be a seam here, and that pokes out through that seam, and this sits underneath. These patterns are not drafted for that kind of things. If you want, I can show you later how that's going to work. It's basically the same thing as we did to the zipper, and we still have to leave. So the seam is going to stay. The seam is going to stay here, basically, on this part, and you just have to leave these slits open on like this here, leave open in between. So then you're going to have a facing here, and you're going to have this fabric goes around and rolls and join it here. Does that make sense? Right. So that's in the case that you don't want to see the busk itself. That's going to hide that. Okay? You good? Is it off?